Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. This is what to expect when implementing Koha and Aspen. My name is Morgan, and I'm an Aspen implementation specialist here at Bywater Solutions. And I'm also accompanied here by Kelly and Jesse and Bill from the sales team. So they're here to keep an eye on the chat and see if there's any questions too. So I work closely with libraries who are switching to using Aspen Discovery for their library catalog. And a lot of times that also entails working with libraries who are going to Koha and Aspen at the same time. Sometimes it's just libraries who are keeping their current ILS and just changing over to Aspen for their patrons. But a lot of times we do have partners who are also migrating to the open source Koha ILS supported by Bywater as well, which is what we're going to be talking about today. And I worked in libraries for several years before joining Bywater. So it's been so much fun still getting to work with libraries and library technology in this way. And I also worked in a library when we were switching library catalogs. So I also know what it's like to go through this kind of change from a frontline perspective too. So today I'm going to give you an overview of the general process for what it's like to implement to both a new ILS and a new discovery layer at the same time. So Koha and Aspen, they are a great pair. And they work really well together. And so migrating to both of these open source products, both supported by Bywater, is a really nice advantage. This helps us when it comes to making sure you're set up for success in both systems, since we have experts on either side to help you. And we know when something is just handled in Koha or just in Aspen, or when something needs configuration in both places. And this also means that you're only working with one support company for both of these products. And since we at Bywater are all working together internally and talking to each other, this also helps streamline that communication as well. So the first part of any implementation process is it's the beginning. So you sign your contract. Once you've worked with our sales team to work through all the contract details that's signed, then we can get started on your project. So right after that is everyone at Bywater knows that you signed your contract and that you'll be joining us. So a project manager will reach out to you to schedule a kickoff call. In this meeting, that's when we start to get to know you, put some faces to names, we'll set our expectations, and we'll start talking about some of these important details that are going to help us shape your project. We also emphasize, our support and how we communicate during this process, which is through our ticketing system. And using our ticketing system, that helps all of our staff to see what's going on at any time and make sure that things are getting done. And so no one request ends up in some person's email inbox. Mine is kind of like a black hole. So the ticketing system helps keep it where we can all get to it. Not only for us, but also for your staff as well. We can set it up that way. Around this time, we're also going to request an initial data extract from you, along with having you fill out a pre-mapping spreadsheet where we ask a lot of questions about your data, just so that we can get to know the little nitty-gritty things. And so our data specialists can start analyzing and mapping what you send us. Our team will also work with you to confirm the general days and times that work well for your staff to meet with us. And we'll talk through the details of your training, whether that's, webinar only training, or if our trainers are going on site to train your staff. Typically, within the first few weeks of the kickoff, or at least closer to when your project will actually begin, after we've settled on a meeting schedule, we'll have a project overview meeting where we will introduce you to your implementation plan. And right now we use something called Monday.com. It's a project management tool, and we use that to build out these plans so that at this meeting, we give you a tour of this plan just to let you know this is how Monday.com works. This is just the one source of truth during your implementation that lists out all the core meetings that we're going to have, the agenda for each meeting. And for every meeting, there's also a list of pre-work, which is resources to read or videos to watch beforehand if you really want to get a head start. And there's also an agenda, of course, and a list of your action items. So actions to take following that meeting. So you're not wondering, like, what do I have to do next? It's laid out there for you. Um, this plan also has important links to things like a shared drive folder that has your mapping documents, recordings, and other reference material. So it's just kind of like one place where you can see all the important details about your implementation. And speaking of implementation, so after we have your project planning meeting, that's when we start to have kind of your implementation meetings. So our first meetings will focus on that initial data mapping. So we'll talk to you about, your answers in the pre-mapping spreadsheet, what we found in your data, if anything, came up you didn't mention, or just anything that we have questions about. And we'll also discuss how some of your policies and circulation rules might inform some of this data mapping. So, how things work in Koha and Aspen might be a little different than what you're currently working with. So we are here to advise you on the best ways to map your data into these systems. And a migration is actually a really great opportunity to clean up your data and streamline your processes. So it's always really nice to head into this kind of project with an open mind. During the implementation, we also have meetings focused on discussing your library policies. So this is including like your circulation rules, patron policies, acquisitions, cataloging, serials, notices, and all those things. These discussions we have with you help us configure Koha and Aspen settings and help us guide some of the things we want to talk about during training as well. Like, for example, if your library wants to allow patrons to link accounts in Aspen, we definitely want to demo that for you and make sure you know how it works. But if you're not, then of course we can just skip that for training. And in general, we try to ask lots of questions to help uncover things in your workflows that maybe you hadn't even considered or thought of. It's just so second nature to you that it doesn't even think of to bring it up. So we try to uncover these things and make sure that you're set up for success in these new systems. We'll also have a few meetings dedicated just to focusing on Aspen customization. So these meetings are going to be about setting up your theme, creating your browse categories and placards and lists, and all the tools that Aspen has within it. And these meetings they're a mix of training. So we're showing your admin staff how to actually do these things and set things up and how Aspen works. And then also we're having still more of those discussions just to make sure that Aspen and Koha are set up correctly for a great experience for your users. This implementation stage also includes some milestones. So while the meetings are happening, some of this other stuff is also going on, and we let you know when these things are coming up too. So some of the big milestones are getting access to your Koha and Aspen sites. So they're not simply just test sites that are going to explode and go away before you go live. We call them your pre-production sites because it's going to be the same site. It's just the data that's going to be cleared out and make room for your live data. Speaking of data, another big milestone is, when all your initial data extract gets loaded into Koha and Aspen. So that's when you can begin testing your data. And we do provide a really comprehensive outline of these are the things to look at in your data and make sure that you're keeping an eye on and testing out just so that you can uncover anything that doesn't look as you would expect so that we can fix that. And it's also a time, of course, to start getting familiar with the interfaces. These are totally new interfaces. And this is when you just start getting in there, poking around and getting used to things. And last, it's also a time for configuration. So we're going to ask you to start getting in there, doing some configuration, such as setting up your circulation rules in Koha, or maybe going into Aspen and setting up a system message that can welcome users to your new catalog and maybe link to a help tutorial you've created or something. This the goal of this configuration stage, it's important because our goal is to have your Koha and Aspen sites set up as closely to what your staff and patrons will be using as possible. Of course, that isn't to say that you have to have everything perfect and 100% done. You don't have to scramble. There will be adjustments after training. That's a normal part of the process too. But we just want to make sure that what we're showing to staff is it's pretty close to what they're going to be using. And speaking of training, so after our data policy and customization meetings are done and you spent some time configuring, then comes the training phase. So this part can vary a little depending on whether you've contracted to have Bywater staff travel out to train you on site, or maybe you're opting in for a webinar version of the training, or maybe you're doing a little mix of both. But essentially, this is where we branch out to train beyond just your core admin team. So if you're going for a train the trainer model, we can definitely do that. Or if you'd like to train us to train most or all of your staff, we can definitely work with you on that too. We want to work with you at the beginning of the process. So during that initial planning stage to figure out what type of training will work best for your staff and collaborate on what that training schedule will look like. So by the time you get to training, that's all going to be figured out in advance. So for training staff on Koha, our team will typically offer different sessions covering specific chunks of topics. And there's some flexibility in there, but just to give you an idea of what this can look like, this can include sessions that are geared towards general staff. So where we cover things like the staff interface, patrons, and circulation. Sometimes we even condense it into what we call like a circulation basics session. But then we can also provide other sessions for more specialized staff about acquisitions, cataloging, processing items, for your tech services staff, reports, all those types of things. And we've also provided sessions that are geared specifically more to managers and supervisors. We also can provide what we call like a learning lab, where it's blocks of times where any staff can sign up to come attend and ask questions, walk through exercises together after they've had some time to process the other training they've gone through and, over the days before that. For the Aspen side of the project, we also provide a user experience training, which I like to think of as the ta-da moment where we show off your hard work so far to that point to all your staff. This is where we give everyone a tour of all the things that are going to get your staff really excited about Aspen. So we're showing them account functionality, searching, search tools, other discovery features, things that they're going to want to know about so that they can help your patrons when they have questions. Or maybe there's something that would help them, like saved searches that they might not even know how to ask for. But if you know about saved searches in Aspen, you can say, hey, this is how you do that thing. Sometimes the user experience happens in a separate webinar session, and other times it happens in coordination with the Koha training on site. So when that happens, usually it's combined with that circulation essentials training, just so that we can show your staff, hey, here's what kind of the basic, searching and things looks like in Koha. We hop over to Aspen. This is what it looks like to do that same thing in Koha. And, the benefits of searching in one place or another, just because they're useful for different things. They're two different tools. So we kind of compare and contrast. After we get through training, now we're in the final stretch before your go live date. So this is the time where we work with your data specialist to work on any final refinements to your data. And to keep testing that data. So it's important to just keep at it, go through the checklists, make sure that you're, thinking of all the little things, your day-to-day workflows, just going through those in the new system. So this is also a great time to solidify your own internal documentation. One of the ways I personally learn best is by creating documentation. So, it's great to have those guides that are ready to go for your circulation staff, your other staff, and even for your patrons. This is a great time to come up with little tutorials and things for users learning how to use the new Aspen catalog. Aspen is pretty intuitive, so you may not even need tutorials, but sometimes it's nice to offer anyway because change is change, and anything that can help people get more comfortable with the change is always a good thing, I think. So along with the internal documentation, we talked to you about this stuff beforehand too, but this is the final stretch. So make sure that your marketing and communication plans are in place, both internal and external. You want to get people excited about the change that's coming. You want to let them know that it's happening. So get out that information about this big change and create that excitement and buzz. This is also a great time to reach out and double check that you've reached out to any vendors using your ILS for authentication. So that's things like Overdrive and Hoopla and your databases, all that stuff. Preparing your systems integrations for the switch too, so self-checkouts and other machines, and all those other little things just to make sure that the stage is set and everything is ready to go at your go live date. Again, we talked to you about this towards the beginning, so we prepare you, but we remind you again at this stage as well, since if anything slipped through the cracks, this is the time to get on that. And speaking of that, this is why we have a pre-go live meeting, at least one. So we want to make sure that we're walking you through the pre-go live checklist. So we provide you with a guide of this is what to focus on. This is what's important right now, and explain what's going to happen leading up to go live and during migration weekend. So we'll list out important dates and all that information so that you have a clear idea of what to expect and what to focus on. So during migration weekend, again, this is something that we talked to you a lot about at the beginning and during and heading up to go live. So this is where the final magic happens. We clear out your old data and we load in your final data extract. Typically, we recommend that libraries close during migration weekend just to make it a smoother transition for your patrons and staff. But we also frequently work with libraries who need to stay open too. We understand that some libraries, there's red tape, you can't close, the board won't approve it. That's okay. We do have ways to manage offline circulation functions so that you can still help your patrons and stay open while migration is in process. So once we clear out the old data in both Koha and Aspen, we're preparing your sites to load your final data extract. And once everything is loaded in and finalized, we send out an email to let you all know. And after that, it's really just a matter of switching over all of your staff links and catalog links so that you can go live on Koha and Aspen. And go live day and beyond. So once go live day finally arrives, it's a very exciting day for sure, but we just want you to know that we are here for you. All of our staff are aware of your go live and we are ready to assist you at any time. So you'll be able to reach out to us by phone or by submitting tickets. You also have access to our communities on Slack. So there is a Koha Partners Slack workspace and an Aspen Partners Slack workspace. And those are really for connecting with other libraries in the Koha and Aspen communities. So we are on there and we do hop on and answer questions and things, but those are invaluable to you just to talk to other libraries using Aspen and Koha and say hey, I'm trying to do this new workflow. Does anyone have something written out that I can take a look at? Or has anyone ever tried to do this customization in Aspen? Those are great spaces to get ideas and work through things that you're thinking about with. We'll also have a little after your go live, usually within a week or so, we'll have a post go live meeting to go through your open tickets, make sure that anything that needs to be resolved or, this was already taken care of, we'll close that out. Just kind of, crossing our T's and dotting our I's and such. And we'll go over any questions that have come up since you've gone live. Since at last your staff and patrons will be using it full time. So sometimes new questions come up that people hadn't thought of yet. So that's why we think it's important to continue to meet with you after go live. And just because you've gone live and we've had our post go live meeting, that does not mean that our partnership is over. Not by a long shot. So this is an ongoing partnership. So we will continue to work together to refine your systems, your configuration. Of course, new features are going to keep coming out for Koha and Aspen too. So you may have questions about those. We do have webinars and things like the Aspen Gathering and the Koha upgrade previews that you can attend to see what's coming ahead and be prepared and ask questions. This also means that you can file bugs with the Koha community. So if you have a suggestion for an enhancement or an idea, you can submit that to the Koha Bugzilla community and submit development requests for Aspen as well. So we thrive on your feedback and ideas that will keep making both Koha and Aspen just better and better for libraries and library users. This is why these things exist. This is why we do what we do. It is for libraries. It is for library users. So it's just a really exciting time once you get to this stage, because even though it might be the end of the implementation, it is just the beginning of all that we'll do together. So I guess before we move on to this, I'll have this up, but are there any questions from anyone about the implementation process?
I don't see any questions yet, but Morgan, I would ask you to talk a little bit about something. I know this comes up a lot when we're talking to potential libraries who are kind of looking into making the switch to open source software. And sometimes, they're like, can you talk about other libraries that are using it and show examples? And I think y'all do such a great job when you're working with our libraries through the implementation process, telling them, okay, here's a similar library of this size, and this is the option that they've done. And that really helps them, get some guidance from y'all and then also see some other examples. So can you just talk about how that process, not only helps the community, but helps them also, guide and make decisions along the way?
Yeah, so you're talking about maybe talking about different types of libraries that go with Koha and Aspen.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the fun things about this is that our implementation process, we have done just single small libraries who just have one location and they're making the switch over to Koha and Aspen, to very large consortia with hundreds of locations. And obviously there is some room for finessing during the implementation process. It's not exactly a cookie cutter process every time. Everything that I outlined those are just kind of the essential core elements of an implementation. So we may need to have more meetings about your data. If there's a lot of complex data with, you have lots of different member libraries in a consortia who are doing all kinds of different things, we may need more meetings to talk about your data and your data mapping and make sure that we're getting it right. So we absolutely understand that and accommodate that. And likewise, if you are a smaller library system or just a single library, we don't necessarily need to make you go through 5 catalog meetings or, 3 Aspen theme customization meetings. So we can scale it down just so that, you're not getting overwhelmed with a bunch of stuff that you don't necessarily need, and just making sure that you're comfortable with the basic system, because these systems are extremely customizable, which means that if you just I just want a catalog and a system where I can check stuff in and check out, that's great. We can help work with you to make sure that's working for you. But if you're like, I want to know about every little thing I can customize and really get in there, we can also work with that. We can and do, because there's just so many options for all ends of the spectrum. So I hope that answers that a little bit.
Very well.
Yeah.
There was another question that came in. Any big lessons learned for public libraries moving from Sierra to Koha?
Ooh,
And
I wish. Oh, go ahead, Jesse.
Oh, you start, Morgan.
Oh, I was just saying, like, because I know that that Cal worked with one recently. um, and I wasn't on that one, but I trying to think of Sierra specifically. Um, I
Yeah,
mean,
well, I'll just jump in and say, some of the things that we really stress is one, the vocabulary difference, where Sierra is going to call, let's say, lists or running lists, what Koha refers to as reports. And so you'll see one of the biggest differences when you're beginning that implementation and migration process is understanding the vocabulary, where you might refer to it one way in Sierra and Koha refers to it different. And we provide documentation and a glossary of terms so you can familiarize yourself with that. Your data implementation specialist will also help you during that mapping process that Morgan so eloquently displayed in the beginning. And that is a good process for you to get aware of, because again, just little things where, Sierra might call it one thing and Koha calls it another. You're going to have that transition of, figuring out how one thing works in one place and how it works in the next.
yeah, and adding on to that, I know that with Sierra, like because there's a lot of information contained in just those location codes, like it's the physical location plus like the shelving location, essentially. Since all that information is kind of smooshed into a code, that can be a little bit of a thing to adapt to. Is in Koha, we need to split those things out. Like you have your locations, and you can have your shelf locations, which is what is going to help the patron locate this in your building. And then you also have the option if you want to implement a separate collection code as well. So we provide different levels of granularity for statistics, for display in the catalog so people know what they're looking for and where to find it. So I would say that's probably something to be aware of, and we work with you and know that's a thing. So um, I'm not quite sure how to answer the follow-up question about the load profile tables, but I know that that's something data works on.
Yeah, and with the load profile tables, that's just another terminology difference. We call them MARC frameworks, and that allows you to decipher and set up which fields are being used, which can be repeated, which can be mandatory. And then we also have something called profiles that you can create when you're bringing in data into your system, let's say from an outside vendor. Maybe you order with Baker and Taylor or Brodart or Ingram or, one of the book jobbers. You can set up profiles that are similar to load tables. So it remembers those settings and it makes it a lot more efficient when you're bringing those MARC records into the system.
Great questions. Thank you so much, Victor. Okay. Um, well, there's still time for questions if anyone has any last minute ones. Oh, I see something in the chat. Let me see. Maybe we are currently using OCLC Discovery. Implementation from OCLC. Don't we have OCLC Wise that we've done? Yeah, we have done a few migrations from OCLC Wise into Koha and Aspen Discovery. I will say that the experiences have been amazing. Uh, Recently, Chesapeake public libraries in Virginia, and we have a couple other in implementation as well. But I remember I went on site for that one for the Aspen portion of training, and we had people literally clapping. The staff were clapping because they were so excited about what we were showing them in Koha and Aspen. So yeah, that experience was overwhelmingly positive. So, all right. Let's see, there's another question.
Yep. So Victor, the 2311 just came out last week. So what our team is in the process right now of essentially going through all of the new enhancements and developments and new feature releases that have been added to the system. And so we'll begin working on those and starting to do our documentation and blog posts and videos for those in the upcoming month.
Awesome. All right. Well, This screen has been up for a minute, so hopefully you've been able to take note of our upcoming webinars in 2024. Introduction to Aspen Discoveries on January 24th. We have a PLA conference preview on February 13th and implementing Aspen Discovery in a consortium on March 28th. So if you do have any more questions, definitely get those to us. You can reach out to sales@bywatersolutions.com if you think of a question later that you didn't get to ask today. So just thank you all so much for being here today. It was great presenting for you, and I hope you have an amazing rest of your week. Bye, everyone.
Oh,
Thanks,
thanks,
Kelly,
Morgan.
Jesse, and Bill. Bye.
Bye bye.